The Louisville Cardinals got back into the win column on Saturday afternoon after taking down the 24th ranked NC State Wolfpack 25-10 at Cardinal Stadium on Senior Day. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're going to talk about Jawhar Jordan's big performance, the Cardinals defense stepping up yet again, and more. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. The Louisville football team victorious yet again, this time after defeating the 24th ranked NC State Wolfpack 25-10 on Saturday at Cardinal Stadium on Senior Day. We're going to talk about Jawhar Jordan's best performance as a Louisville Cardinal so far. We'll also discuss the Cardinals defense stepping up yet again tremendously. And then we'll dive into some of the offensive struggles as it pertains to the passing game that were put on display on Saturday afternoon. So we'll start out with the big performance from Jawhar Jordan. As I mentioned, in my opinion, it was Jordan's best performance as a member of the Louisville Cardinals so far. Transferring in from Syracuse right before the 2021 season, early August, I do believe, Jordan didn't necessarily receive a ton of work last season until the end when he had the touchdown return on the kickoff against Air Force in the bowl game. He got some work against Duke, Syracuse, and I'm not sure if he got any work against Kentucky. I don't believe so. If he did, it was late on in the game. But regardless, needless to say, not a ton of touches in that game or in that season last year. But 2022 comes into the year probably the least talked about of the four running backs that were in line to receive significant workloads. And that's not necessarily crazy to suggest because the other three that were discussed are Tiyon Evans, Travion Cooley, and Jalen Mitchell. And with Tiyon Evans still battling injury, same with Jalen Mitchell, Travion Cooley continuing to miss games due to personal reasons, Jawhar Jordan got the start against the NC State Wolfpack on Saturday, and he turned in his best performance as a Louisville Cardinal. This game was, in my opinion, going to be a defensive slugfest. That's why when we discussed the keys to the game for victory for Louisville on Friday, a lot of it was centered around the offensive side of the ball, starting out quickly, gaining momentum early on, putting up points early on, setting the tone in the trenches from an offensive line standpoint to open up running lanes for your running backs, protecting whoever was to start at quarterback. Obviously, it was announced shortly after that podcast was released that Malik Cunningham was out, and thus Brock Doman was the starter. The performance from Jordan was huge for multiple reasons. From the rushing aspect of it, he led the Cardinals in rushing, 16 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown, had a long of 34 yards, and also averaged 6.6 yards per carry. What makes this mostly impressive was because it was up against a top 10 rushing defense. Coming into this performance, the Wolfpack had the 9th best rushing defense, averaging just over 92 yards per carry to their opponents on a game-in, game-out basis. Jawhar Jordan goes over the century mark. You look at it and you think, 105 yards? That's his best performance at Louisville? When you factor in that Jawhar Jordan and the rest of the Louisville running backs have been approaching this season by committee and last season as well, you don't have the opportunity to get 25 carries per game on a consistent basis. That's just not going to happen. But it's just a matter of making the most out of the carries. And 6.6 yards per rush, that's very, very significant. And for a Louisville offense that struggled all game long, it was extremely needed. The passing offense still struggling, and we'll talk about that here in the third segment. But Brock Doman and the Louisville passing attack really wasn't able to get much going. Had a couple of big plays, especially in the second half, but from an overall sense, Louisville really wasn't able to get much done in that category. So the rushing attack had to answer the bell, and Jawhar Jordan, starting this game, was able to rise to the occasion, went over the century mark against one of the best rushing defenses in the country. And with Tyon Evans still battling injury, he was active, had 2 carries, but still did not get a ton of work. Travion Cooley, to my understanding, missed this game again due to personal reasons. Jalen Mitchell out as well. It was up to Jawhar Jordan and Maurice Turner to lead the way for the Louisville rushing attack, and they did just that. Granted, they were also missing Malik Cunningham, which is a big aspect of the rushing attack, is the RPO situations, the quarterback being a big part of that rushing attack, being one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. Jawhar Jordan had his work cut out for him, and he rose to the occasion. He has had a performance this season in which he has topped 105 yards, so this isn't necessarily his best performance on the ground. But when you look at his impact on the special teams portion of this game, it's without a doubt his best performance as a Cardinal. Look, neither offense was able to get anything going. NC State and Louisville both dealing with quarterback injuries, and it was put on full display. Really not able to get much going. NC State not necessarily known for their rushing abilities, although they did have some success. The Wolfpack only put up 10 points. You look at this game and think, oh, a kickoff return for a touchdown, does that really make that big of a difference in a game that you won by 15 points, multiple scores? Of course it does, because when you look at when that touchdown was scored for Louisville, it was a very close game, and Jawhar Jordan's kickoff return for a touchdown was able to ultimately give Louisville a lead of over 3 points, which they've kind of been going back and forth. And we saw that in the second half where Louisville only had a 3-point lead, but that was before NC State went on that that was after NC State went on that big touchdown drive when they went down the field. That was really the only drive in which NC State was able to get anything going. But in the first half, when they needed any spark, whether that was on offense, defense, special teams, Jawhar Jordan saw a ball bounced near the, 3-yard line, caught it at the 2, and ran it back 98 yards for the touchdown. Louisville did go into halftime with a 10-point lead. Obviously, that wasn't the end-all, be-all, but still a huge momentum-shifting play. Granted, Louisville's special teams hasn't necessarily been as potent and as deadly as it was maybe in the early 2000s, but it was a huge play. So when you put together that special teams touchdown, you saw that Jawhar Jordan went over the 100-yard mark, had a rushing touchdown as well. You know, being able to alleviate some of those offensive concerns and being able to put together a solid performance, not only on the ground, but on the special teams stat sheet as well. Look, it's no secret that this was the best performance in Jawhar Jordan's Louisville career, and it was huge and definitely needed for the Cardinals to come out victorious in this game against NC State. Another aspect of this game that helped Louisville to victory was, and stop me if you've heard this before, the defense continuing to step up. We'll talk about the huge efforts that the defense put forth here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Louisville listeners can order the number one rated Simply Safe home security system for 50, not 15% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. I have recently installed a Simply Safe system, and it has been a game changer for me and my home and my family. Family safety means the most to me, as I'm sure it means the most for you all as well. It was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, which is a third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real, so you can get priority police response right away. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off on any new SimpliSafe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnCollege today. That's their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. simplysafe.com/LockedOnCollege. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Moving right on along into discussing the strengths of the performance over the NC State Wolfpack that saw the Louisville Cardinals victorious 25-10 over the 24th ranked team in the country. Like I said, both teams dealing with their respective injuries at the quarterback position. NC State lost Devin Leary earlier on in the season, and then lost MJ Morris, their backup quarterback. The true freshman sustained, I believe it was a knee injury last week against Boston College, and a loss to the Eagles. And now Dave Doran had to turn to the third string and fourth string quarterbacks, respectively. NC State went with a dual quarterback system on Saturday against the Cardinals. Third string transfer from Charleston Southern, Jack Chambers, got the start. He was sacked twice on the opening drive. The Cardinals defense rising to the occasion. Played a couple more series, and then insert Ben Finley, the freshman from Phoenix, Arizona. He has been with the program 3 years now. Had a decent performance against the Cardinals on Saturday. 16 of 35, 205 yards, 1 touchdown to 1 interception. The interception was on the final play of the game on a prayer to the end zone. So take that as you will. But regardless, Louisville's defense did what they needed to do against an offense that has been struggling, only allowing 10 points. And when you break the performance down, 7 of those 10 points came on a drive that NC State, I don't think, had under 10 yards per play on. So it was a big drive for NC State that was capped off by a 34-yard touchdown catch and run. But other than that, the Louisville defense did what they needed to do in this game to come out victorious. They had to kind of rise to the occasion with the offense struggling yet again. Now, granted, the offense did put up 25 points against a solid defense, which, I mean, it's respectable, but when you look at the performance as a whole, still a lot to be desired. But this was another solid performance defensively. Look, there was a lot of criticism for the Cardinals defense after that loss against Boston College that put the Cardinals at 2-3. And Brian Brown and company, Scott Satterfield, and the rest of the defensive coaching staff absolutely, with their backs against the wall, rose to the occasion. So, credit to the defensive game plan. They once again did what worked, which was bring pressure, and, bring more pressure after the opposing quarterback. The Cardinals were able to get into the backfield early on. That wasn't necessarily the case towards the end of the first half, going into the second half, but the Cardinals did end up with 5 sacks. They had 6 tackles for loss. They had 6 quarterback hurries and 6 pass deflections. So I think overall, I mean, in his last game at Cardinal Stadium, Yasir Abdullah continuing a strong second half of the season. He had 2.5 sacks against the NC State Wolfpack, had 3 tackles for loss, third on the team with 7 total tackles. Jarvis Brownlee led the way with 11 tackles, 4 pass deflections. Now, granted, the NC State passing attack sort of picked on Jarvis Brownlee in coverage, tried to go his way more often than not. And a couple times, I mean, they succeeded. I mean, Jarvis Brownlee got called for a costly third down pass interference penalty. He also gave up a couple of catches, but did what he needed to do for the most part, got 11 tackles, also recorded 4 pass deflections. You also had Monty Montgomery with a big sack in the game. He had a tackle and a half for loss and also a pass deflection, had 2 quarterback hurries. Des Tell had half of a sack as well. Ashton Gelati with a sack. So overall, I think it was a huge performance overall from the Louisville defense. So one of the parts of the defensive performance that I thought was extremely encouraging was the secondary. I think since Quincy Riley and MJ Griffin have seen their respective workloads increase, I think we have seen the Louisville passing defense get better in the secondary. And that's no disrespect to Kendrick Duncan Jr. or Chandler Jones or whoever Riley and MJ Griffin may have been playing more snaps in replacement of. But I think that, MJ Griffin and Quincy Riley have been very, very solid in passing down coverages. When you look at what they were able to do, Quincy Riley and MJ Griffin, neither of them recorded a pass deflection, but I think that they're very solid in coverage. Quincy Riley had the interception at the end of the game on the final play of scrimmage in the end zone. So overall, it was a solid performance, one that I think that the defense needed to have. I didn't necessarily think that the rushing attack was as bad as it was for NC State on Saturday. I thought that they would have more than 77 yards. Now, granted, sack yardage is factored into that mix. Jordan Houston had 8 for 41. Michael Allen, 9 for 31. But overall, 2.5 yards per carry for the NC State rushing attack. Not necessarily a potent rushing attack, but Louisville's defense did what they needed to do in that respect. They forced the opposing quarterbacks into some tough situations. Now, granted, Finley and Chambers both missed some throws that could have extended drives, but Louisville's defense did what they needed to do to put pressure on those 2 quarterbacks, got the tackles for losses, and just overall turned in a performance that has been on par with what we've seen since the start of the second half of the season. So just another good performance from the Louisville Cardinals defensively. In his last game at Cardinal Stadium, Yasir Abdullah, he balled out, and that's all you can ask for. Yaya Diaby as well. Momo Sanogo had some big-time plays. Monty Montgomery. The 2022 senior class definitely left their mark in what could be most of their final games at Cardinal Stadium. I know some have eligibility to come back next season, but obviously that is still unknown. So solid performance from the Cardinals defense, and it had to be that way because the Cardinals yet again struggled offensively. We're going to talk about the passing game woes here in a second after we talk about our friends over at Nissan. Our partners at Nissan have worked with us to create a new segment across the Locked On College Network titled Thrilling Moments, where we highlight the most exciting play from the Louisville Cardinals weekend matchups or throughout the history of our alma mater. This week's thrilling moment should not be a surprise. as Jawhar Jordan's 98-yard kickoff return is the moment of the week. A huge performance from Jawhar Jordan, mainly due in part to this big kickoff return that was able to help shift the momentum in favor of the Cardinals. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. So transitioning over into the offensive side of the ball, the Louisville Cardinals struggled again. They had some moments where they connected on some big plays that put the Cardinals in solid positions. They had a decent day running the football. They had 192 yards on the ground, over 100 yards of rushing yards let me rephrase that. 100 more yards on the ground than NC State usually gives up to their opponents. 39 carries for 192 yards and a touchdown, average just under 5 yards per carry. Jawhar Jordan led the way, 16 for 105. Maurice Turner, 15 for 59. Brock Turner, 6 for 26. And Tyon Evans, 2 for 2. But in the passing game, Louisville really wasn't able to get much going. Brock Doman on the afternoon had a couple of big plays. The screen to Marshawn Ford was a big play down the sideline in the second half. Tyler Hudson's catch and run that put Louisville at the 2-yard line in the fourth quarter or at the end of the third quarter, one of the two. But regardless, on the afternoon, only 12 of 25 for 153 yards, no touchdowns and no interceptions, a quarterback rating of 73.7, 6.1 yards per completion. Now, granted, this is not all on Brock Doman. I do think that the offensive line gave him ample time to go through his reads, go through his progressions. They allowed one sack, had a couple of quarterback hurries, but it was kind of a performance that is both on the quarterback and the receivers as well. From a quarterback standpoint, I think that Brock Doman hesitated at times, whether or not that was a matter of not trusting his reads, not liking what he saw transpiring and unfolding in the secondary, so on and so forth. I think that he was a little bit too willing to throw the football away, especially pretty early on plays. Now, granted, that beats the alternative of taking sacks. So if I'm overreacting or overly criticizing Doman's performance, I do apologize. From watching the game, it wasn't all throughout the game. I mean, there were just a couple plays to where I think that he threw the ball away in situations that maybe he should have tried to extend plays or tried to go to another read. But regardless, it's easier said than done. In hindsight is always 20/20. Doman did have some instances to where he overthrew receivers. There was an instance to where I forget who the receiver was, but Doman missed a receiver coming out of the backfield at the 30-yard line, had a wide open receiver on a wheel route, and if it was on the money, that receiver probably gets down into a first and goal situation at the very worst. So, there were a couple of instances to where he underthrew receivers, overthrew, but also there were instances to where Louisville had trouble getting open for their receivers. I think that the receivers, there were instances to where the receivers struggled to get open, struggled to create separation. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for Brock Doman to complete passes. Now, granted, this wasn't an issue for the duration of the game, just like Doman's throwing the ball away and missing some throws wasn't a problem throughout the whole entirety of the game. But when you combine both of those aspects, both the struggles making those reads, making the throws at times, and also the wide receivers struggling to create separation, sure, the offensive line did their job, but the passing game struggles continued. Now, granted, I think that some of this can be on play calling as well. when it gets pretty predictable. I think it allows the defense to kind of just wait for Louisville's offense to do what they're going to do. And I think NC State did a good job of sniffing out what Louisville was going to do in certain situations. Now, granted, they did go up against a very solid NC State defense, so there must be credit given to Dave Doran and the NC State defense. But regardless, I also think that there were instances to where you look at 25 points, Louisville was just unable to capitalize at times, and something's got to change for next week's game against Kentucky, because if you put together that performance like you did against NC State, it may be a rough afternoon for the Cardinals, because the defense is going to be tested by one of the nation's most potentially lethal rushing attacks, with Chris Rodriguez, Cavassier Smoke, Juton McClain, so on and so forth. So I think that it was enough to get the job done, but the passing game woes continued to be the main struggle that held the offense back. So if Doman is yet again the starter next week, I would like to see the play calling call for more short and intermediate routes to where you get the ball toward the sideline. You allow Brock Doman to go through his reads, but just making the predictability, or at least limiting the predictability on offense from a play calling standpoint. For Doman, it's a matter of trusting your reads, and for Louisville's wide receivers, it's a matter of creating separation. And Kentucky's defensive backs, talking to a couple of my friends that are Kentucky fans, it seems like from a solid Kentucky defense that may be the weak link is the secondary, but still a very respectable secondary. So something's going to have to change for next week. It was a performance that was able to get the job done this week, but some improvements are definitely going to need to be made ahead of next week. So we talked about this game in particular, Jawhar Jordan's best performance as a Louisville Cardinal so far, the defense stepping up, and the offensive woes as it pertains to the passing game struggles. There will be another episode today talking about the Maui Invitational for the men's basketball team, the volleyball performance against Pittsburgh, and another segment that will probably either be recruiting or the weekly mailbag. So be sure to tune in there. But that's going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here very soon.